The day my family told me I wasn't welcome at my own sister's wedding, that was the day the steel hardened inside me. I remember standing in the hallway, the floral wallpaper mocking me with its cheerful pattern, as my mother's words echoed, sharp and precise. "Stella, your absence would be the greatest gift we could receive." The air hung thick with unspoken accusations, years of perceived failures and quiet resentments, suddenly coalescing into a single, devastating blow. I felt the world tilt, the vibrant colors of my life draining away, leaving behind a cold, gray ache. If you've ever felt abandoned by the very people who should cherish you, subscribe now to hear how Stella turned her pain into power. Woodhaven, Kansas had always been a gilded cage. From the moment my younger sister Clara was born, she was the sun around which our family revolved. Beautiful, charming, effortlessly gifted, she excelled at everything she touched, basking in the adoration of our parents, while I, Stella, the quiet, bookish older sister, perpetually lingered in the shadows. It wasn't that they actively mistreated me, not at first. It was more a subtle neglect, a constant comparison, a feeling of never quite measuring up. Clara's triumphs were celebrated with lavish parties and effusive praise. My modest achievements were met with polite nods and gentle suggestions for improvement. I learned early on to stifle my own ambitions, to shrink myself to fit the mold of the dutiful, supportive sister. I told myself it was love, that their happiness was my happiness. But deep down, a seed of resentment began to sprout, watered by years of unspoken disappointment and unacknowledged pain. The favoritism grew bolder as we grew older. Clara received the best tutors, the latest clothes, and a brand new car for her 16th birthday. I was given hand-me-downs, told to focus on my studies, and encouraged to find a part-time job to pay for my own expenses. The message was clear. Clara was the priority. I was expendable. Then came the accusations. A missing necklace, a damaged face, a whispered rumor. Suddenly, I was the scapegoat for every misfortune that befell our perfect family. I tried to defend myself, to plead my innocence, but my words fell on deaf ears. They saw only what they wanted to see, the resentful older sister, jealous of her younger sibling's success. The wedding was to be the ultimate culmination of Clara's fairy tale life, a lavish affair at the country club, attended by the town's elite, a testament to her radiant beauty and undeniable charm. And I, Stella, was deemed a threat to that carefully constructed facade. My presence, they feared, would somehow tarnish the perfection, expose the cracks in their carefully curated image. They never directly said they hated me. My mother used careful words, couching her request in concern for Clara's happiness, for the family's reputation. But the meaning was clear. I was not welcome. I was an embarrassment, a burden. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. The years of quiet resentment, the unspoken pain, the constant feeling of inadequacy, it all coalesced into a cold, hard resolve. I would give them what they wanted. I would disappear, but not in the way they expected. The person I trusted most, my own father, was the one who delivered the final blow. I overheard him on the phone, his voice low and conspiratorial, telling a relative that my emotional instability made my presence at the wedding a risk they couldn't afford to take. "It's for the best, really," he said. "Stella just can't handle seeing Clara so happy. She'll make a scene, I know it." That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about erasing me from their lives entirely. They wanted me gone, not just for a day, but forever. And that realization, that chilling betrayal, was the spark that ignited my plan. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing me from the inside out. Sleep became a battlefield, my mind a relentless projector replaying the scene in the hallway, my mother's dismissive tone, my father's cold betrayal. Each night, I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the floral pattern morphing into grotesque faces, mocking my pain. I tried to reason with them. I wrote letters to my mother, pouring out my heart, begging her to understand. I attempted to have a conversation with my father, but he would either stonewall me with curt replies or launch into a lecture about my attitude and how I needed to be more supportive of Clara. Their responses only deepened the wound, confirming my worst fears. They truly didn't care. I was an inconvenience, a stain on their perfect image, someone to be tolerated, not loved. My grades began to slip. The one thing I had always excelled at, the one area where I felt a sense of accomplishment, was now crumbling beneath the weight of my emotional turmoil. My teachers noticed, of course, but their concerns were met with dismissals from my parents. "Stella's just going through a phase," they would say. "She'll get over it." My friends, sensing the shift in my family dynamics, began to distance themselves. They didn't understand what was happening, and I couldn't bring myself to explain. The shame was too great, the pain too raw. I isolated myself, retreating into the world of books, seeking solace in fictional characters who, unlike my own family, offered unconditional love and acceptance. But even that escape became tainted. The stories I once cherished now seemed to mock my own reality, highlighting the stark contrast between the idealized families I read about and the dysfunctional one I was trapped in. I even tried talking to Clara, hoping that she at least would understand. But she was too caught up in the whirlwind of wedding preparations, too blinded by the spotlight to see the pain I was enduring. She listened politely, offered a few platitudes about family and forgiveness, and then promptly changed the subject back to herself. It was clear that she didn't want to get involved, that she preferred to remain blissfully ignorant of the rift that was tearing our family apart. The rejection from Clara was perhaps the most devastating blow of all. I had always loved her, always protected her, always put her needs before my own. And now, when I needed her the most, she turned her back on me. I started having nightmares, vivid, terrifying dreams where I was trapped in a maze, pursued by shadowy figures representing my parents and Clara. They would chase me relentlessly, their faces contorted with rage, their voices echoing with accusations and insults. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, gasping for air, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. I felt like I was losing my mind, that the constant stress and emotional abuse were pushing me to the brink of sanity. I considered running away, disappearing completely, starting a new life somewhere far away from Woodhaven, Kansas. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would only confirm their perception of me as the unstable, unreliable daughter. And besides, a part of me, a stubborn, defiant part, refused to let them win. I refused to let them break me. I started seeing a therapist. It was the only thing I did for myself. She listened patiently as I recounted my story, offering gentle guidance and support. She helped me understand that I wasn't to blame for my family's behavior, that their actions were a reflection of their own insecurities and unresolved issues. She taught me coping mechanisms, strategies for managing my anxiety and anger. And most importantly, she helped me see that I was worthy of love and respect, regardless of what my family thought of me. The therapy sessions were a lifeline, a safe space where I could be myself, where I could express my pain without judgment. But they weren't enough to erase the years of damage, to heal the deep wounds that my family had inflicted. The resentment still simmered beneath the surface, the anger still burned, the desire for justice still gnawed at my soul. And slowly, gradually, that desire began to morph into something else, something darker, something more dangerous, a thirst for revenge. The day of the wedding arrived like a cruel parody of everything I had ever dreamed of. The entire town seemed to be buzzing with excitement, the air thick with the scent of flowers and expensive perfume. I stayed locked in my room, curtains drawn, the sounds of laughter and celebration filtering through the walls like taunts. I could picture it all. Clara, radiant in her white dress, my parents beaming with pride, the guests showering her with gifts and compliments. And me? I was the ghost in the machine, the invisible outcast, deliberately excluded from the narrative of my own family. The rejection was a gaping wound, festering with every passing hour. I felt like I was suffocating, trapped in a vacuum of loneliness and despair. I picked up a framed photo of Clara and me from when we were children, our arms wrapped around each other, our faces lit with genuine joy. We were inseparable then, two peas in a pod, sharing secrets and dreams. But that felt like a lifetime ago, a distant memory from a past that no longer existed. The photo seemed to mock me, a reminder of everything I had lost, everything that had been stolen from me. My vision blurred. The glass in my hand shattered, sending shards scattering across the floor. The crimson welled up, painting the floor. I barely registered the pain, the physical sensation overshadowed by the emotional agony that consumed me. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about a lifetime of feeling inadequate, of being constantly compared and found wanting, of being deliberately excluded and emotionally abused. It was about a family that had chosen to love one child unconditionally while casting the other aside. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly at the mercy of their whims, constantly defined by their expectations. I had to take control of my own life, to reclaim my own narrative. But how? I was trapped, powerless, with no resources and no support. The thought of confronting them directly filled me with dread. They would simply dismiss me, invalidate my feelings, and reinforce their perception of me as the unstable, resentful daughter. No, I needed a different approach, something more subtle, something more strategic, something that would strike at the heart of their carefully constructed facade. I began to observe them more closely, paying attention to their habits, their weaknesses, their hidden vulnerabilities. I listened to their conversations, eavesdropping on their phone calls, piecing together the fragments of their lives that they tried so hard to conceal. I discovered secrets, dark truths about their past, about their relationships, about their finances, things that could potentially unravel their perfect image, things that could shatter their carefully curated world. At first, I didn't know what I would do with this information. It was simply a way of empowering myself, of reclaiming some sense of control in a situation where I felt utterly powerless. But as the days turned into weeks and the wedding receded into the past, a plan began to form in my mind. A plan that was audacious, risky, and potentially devastating. A plan that would not only expose their hypocrisy, but also exact a measure of revenge for the years of pain and suffering they had inflicted upon me. Their biggest weakness, I realized, was their pride. They were so consumed with maintaining their perfect image, so desperate to be seen as the ideal family, that they were blind to the cracks in their own foundation. They believed they were untouchable, that their wealth and social standing would protect them from any consequences. They underestimated me. They saw me as the quiet, bookish older sister, the one who always followed the rules, the one who would never dare to challenge their authority. They were wrong. I had spent years observing them, analyzing them, learning their weaknesses, and now I was ready to use that knowledge against them. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every email, every financial transaction. I meticulously gathered evidence, building a case that would be impossible to ignore. I knew that what I was doing was dangerous, that if I was caught, the consequences could be severe, but I didn't care. The desire for revenge had consumed me, eclipsing all other concerns. I was no longer the victim. I was the planner, the architect of their downfall. I spent hours researching legal loopholes, consulting with anonymous sources online, learning how to protect myself from potential repercussions. I became a master of disguise, concealing my true intentions behind a facade of normalcy. I smiled, I nodded, I played the role of the dutiful daughter, all the while secretly plotting their demise. The wedding may have been Clara's moment to shine, but the aftermath would be mine. They thought they had silenced me, erased me from their lives, but they had only awakened a sleeping giant, and that giant was about to unleash its fury. They would soon learn that crossing Stella was the biggest mistake they ever made. The day they tried to end me was the day their perfect world began to crumble. The plan began to solidify. It wasn't about physical violence or anything that could land me in jail. My revenge would be surgical, a dismantling of their reputation, their carefully constructed reality. I needed leverage, undeniable proof of their deceit. My first target was my father's business. He always presented himself as a self-made man, a pillar of the community. But I knew the truth. His company was built on shady deals, tax evasions, and exploiting his employees. I remembered overhearing a conversation years ago about offshore accounts and falsified invoices. Now I needed to find the evidence. I started spending more time at home, offering to help with paperwork, subtly snooping around his office when he wasn't there. I installed a hidden camera and a pen, leaving it on his desk, capturing his phone calls and meetings. It was risky, but the potential payoff was enormous. Every night, I would meticulously review the footage, fast-forwarding through hours of mundane conversation, searching for a single slip-up, a hint of wrongdoing. It felt like a dangerous game of cat and mouse, One wrong move, and I would be exposed. But the thrill of the hunt, the anticipation of uncovering their secrets, kept me going. The pen camera wasn't enough. I needed access to his computer. One evening, pretending to be sick, I asked my mother to pick up medicine from the drugstore. While she was gone, I made my move. I knew my father's password. It was the name of his prized boat. I quickly copied crucial files onto an encrypted hard drive: tax returns, bank statements, emails, contracts. It was a goldmine of incriminating evidence. But I couldn't stop there. I needed to protect myself. I knew my father wouldn't hesitate to use his resources to silence me if he discovered my plan. I consulted with a cybersecurity expert online, learning how to cover my tracks, how to erase my digital footprint. I used VPNs, proxy servers, and encrypted messaging apps to communicate with my sources and conceal my activities. It was like living a double life, a constant state of paranoia and vigilance, but I refused to be intimidated. I was determined to see this through, no matter the cost. Clara was next. Her seemingly perfect life was a carefully curated illusion, a facade built on lies and manipulation. I knew that beneath the surface of the charming, popular bride-to-be, there was a deeply insecure and selfish person. Her biggest secret? She had cheated on her fiancé multiple times. I had witnessed one of these infidelities myself years ago at a party. She thought I was too drunk to remember, but I had seen everything. Now I needed to prove it. I created a fake social media profile, posing as one of Clara's admirers. I started messaging her, subtly flattering her ego, probing for information about her past relationships. It didn't take long for her to take the bait. She was so desperate for attention, so eager to believe that she was irresistible, that she readily confessed her indiscretions. I meticulously documented these conversations, saving screenshots and recording audio. I even managed to obtain compromising photos and videos from some of her former lovers. The evidence was damning. But I knew that simply exposing her infidelity wouldn't be enough. I needed to destroy her reputation, to shatter her perfect image in the eyes of everyone she knew. The wedding was approaching, the perfect stage for my grand finale. I imagined the look on her face when her carefully constructed world came crashing down around her, the humiliation, the shame, the utter devastation. It was a delicious fantasy, a source of strength and motivation in my darkest moments. My mother was the most challenging target. She was a master manipulator, a skilled liar, a chameleon who could adapt to any situation. She had spent years perfecting her image as the devoted wife and mother, the selfless caregiver, the pillar of the community. But I knew the truth. She was the puppet master, the one who orchestrated everything, the one who pulled the strings behind the scenes. Her weakness? Her vanity. She was obsessed with her appearance, her social standing, her image of perfection, and she was willing to do anything to protect it. I discovered that she had been secretly embezzling money from the family's charitable foundation, using the funds to pay for her lavish lifestyle, her cosmetic surgeries, her designer clothes. I found the evidence hidden in a safety deposit box, disguised as old family photos. It was a shocking betrayal, even for me. But it also gave me the leverage I needed. I knew that exposing her would not only destroy her reputation, but also potentially land her in jail. It was a risk I was willing to take. The plan was intricate, a delicate dance of deception and manipulation. One wrong step could expose me, could ruin everything. But I was prepared. I had spent months planning, preparing, anticipating every possible scenario. I was ready to unleash my fury. The day of reckoning was near, and I couldn't wait. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I spent hours rehearsing my moves, visualizing the outcome, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. I knew it wouldn't be easy. They would fight back. They would deny everything. They would try to discredit me. But I was armed with the truth, and the truth, I knew, would ultimately prevail. They walked right into it. My father, blinded by his arrogance, never suspected a thing. The hidden camera captured everything: the illegal transactions, the backroom deals, the blatant disregard for the law. I had it all, irrefutable proof of his crimes. I packaged the evidence carefully, encrypting it and sending it to an anonymous source at a major news publication. The story would break soon, and when it did, his empire would crumble. Clara, meanwhile, was busy planning her extravagant wedding, completely oblivious to the storm that was brewing. I continued to play the part of the supportive sister, offering to help with the final preparations, all the while secretly plotting her downfall. I sent her anonymous messages from the fake social media profile, hinting that her secrets were about to be revealed. She dismissed them as the work of a jealous rival, never suspecting that it was her own sister who was pulling the strings. The day before the wedding, I arranged a girls' night out, a final celebration before she tied the knot. I invited all of her closest friends, including some of her former lovers. As the night wore on and the drinks flowed freely, I subtly steered the conversation towards her past relationships.
It didn't take much prodding for her friends to start sharing stories, revealing details about her infidelities that she had desperately tried to keep hidden. The look on her face was priceless, a mixture of shock, anger, and utter mortification. But the real damage was yet to come. My mother, sensing that something was amiss, started to become suspicious. She noticed my increased interest in the family's finances, my subtle questions about the charitable foundation. She began to watch me more closely, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. I knew that it was only a matter of time before she discovered my plan. I had to act fast. I decided to confront her directly, to force her hand. I invited her to lunch at her favorite restaurant, a place where she felt safe and in control. As we sat down, I calmly laid out the evidence of her embezzlement, the bank statements, the receipts, the photos of the safety deposit box. She paled, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. She denied everything, of course, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I told her that I had already sent the evidence to the authorities, that it was only a matter of time before she was arrested. I gave her a choice. She could confess and face the consequences, or she could continue to lie and risk everything. She refused to answer, her lips pressed into a tight line. I knew that she would never admit her guilt, that she would rather destroy herself than admit she was wrong. I stood up to leave, telling her that I had done everything I could. As I walked away, I could feel her gaze burning into my back. I knew that she wouldn't let this go, that she would come after me with everything she had, but I was ready for her. I had anticipated this confrontation, had prepared for her retaliation. The game was about to enter its final phase. They had made a grave error when they thought they could push me around, when they thought they could silence me. They awakened a storm they would not survive. The wedding day dawned bright and sunny, a picture-perfect setting for the impending disaster. The guests arrived, dressed in their finest attire, eager to celebrate the happy couple. But beneath the veneer of joy and excitement, a sense of unease hung in the air. I could see it in their faces, the whispers, the furtive glances. They knew that something was about to happen. I arrived late, fashionably late, dressed in a stunning black dress that screamed defiance. My parents glared at me as I walked in, their eyes filled with a mixture of anger and apprehension. Clara, however, was nowhere to be seen. I learned she was indisposed. Perfect. I took my seat, front and center, and waited for the show to begin. The ceremony started, but something was off. The groom looked pale and nervous, his hands trembling as he recited his vows. As he finished, I stood up. "I object," I announced, my voice ringing through the stunned silence. All eyes turned to me. I held up a flash drive. "I have evidence that will change everything," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Evidence of fraud, deceit, and betrayal." I looked directly at my father, starting with you. Then I pressed play. On a giant screen I had arranged, footage of his illegal activities began to play. Gasps filled the room. Panic erupted. Before the chaos could fully consume the room, another set of images flashed onto the screen. Pictures of Clara with different men filled the hall as whispers turned to outright shouts. Her fiancé stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Finally, images of my mother taking money from the charity played as people began recording the evidence. My mother screamed, "Stella, how could you?" I simply smiled. The police arrived, sirens blaring to escort my father away. Clara ran out, crying. My mother stood there speechless. The wedding, the perfect facade, had completely and utterly imploded. The day they tried to erase me was the day they erased themselves. But this was only the beginning. The news spread like wildfire, and soon their carefully constructed world was in ruins. They lost everything, their money, their reputation, their friends. And I walked away, free at last.
They thought they could break me. They were wrong. I rose from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. Their downfall was my liberation, their pain my triumph. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice. But the story doesn't end here, not even close. The silence after the videos ended was deafening, broken only by gasps and murmurs. My father's face, once a mask of self-assured power, was now a twisted mess of fury and fear as the authorities led him away. Clara, mascara streaming down her face, vanished into the chaos, her perfect future dissolving with every tear. My mother stood frozen, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The crimson rising in her cheeks was the only sign of the volcanic eruption about to take place. She opened her mouth, likely to unleash a torrent of accusations, but no sound came out. The shock had paralyzed her. The guests, once eager participants in this charade of perfection, scattered like cockroaches when the lights come on, their whispers now audible condemnations. The beautiful venue, once a symbol of their status, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping them in their shame. I watched it all unfold, a strange sense of calm washing over me. The storm I had unleashed was now tearing through their lives, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. It was a brutal, surgical strike, and it was precisely what they deserved. Later that day, the news broke. My father's company was raided, his assets frozen, his reputation in tatters. Clara's fiancé called off the wedding, publicly denouncing her betrayal. My mother was under investigation, facing potential charges of embezzlement and fraud. Their carefully constructed facade of perfection was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of their deceit.
They tried to fight back, of course. My father hired expensive lawyers, attempting to discredit the evidence. Clara launched a PR campaign, trying to paint herself as the victim of a jealous sister. My mother denied everything, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But the truth was out. The world had seen them for who they really were, and no amount of spin could change that. In the weeks that followed, their lives continued to unravel. My father's business collapsed, leaving hundreds of people unemployed. Clara became a pariah, ostracized by her friends and family. My mother was indicted on multiple charges, facing the very real possibility of prison time. They lost everything: their money, their status, their freedom. And I simply watched from a distance, a silent observer of their downfall. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate. I just felt a sense of closure, a sense that justice had finally been served. The years of pain and suffering they had inflicted upon me had finally been balanced. I moved away, starting a new life, free from their toxic influence. I surrounded myself with people who loved and supported me, who valued honesty and integrity. I rebuilt my life, piece by piece, stronger and more resilient than ever. Occasionally, I would see their names in the news, a reminder of the past I had left behind. My father, disgraced and impoverished, was living in a small apartment, his empire reduced to ashes. Clara, alone and embittered, was working as a waitress, her dreams of a perfect life shattered. My mother, convicted of her crimes, was serving time in prison, her vanity and arrogance finally brought to heel. Each time I saw their names, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, a confirmation that my actions had been justified. They had tried to end me, to erase me from their lives, but they had only succeeded in destroying themselves. Some people might say that revenge is a dish best served cold. Others might argue that it's a waste of time and energy. But for me, revenge wasn't about inflicting pain or seeking retribution. It was about reclaiming my life, about standing up for myself, about refusing to be a victim any longer. It was about justice. It was about survival. And in the end, it was about finding peace. They lost everything. I just smiled. They thought they could silence me. They were wrong. I used my voice. I used the truth. And I set myself free. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.